Big worms on a big planet and a film with a big runtime. It's a lot to take in. If you missed these small details in Dune Part 2, don't worry, we've got you covered. Spoilers ahead. Dune Part 2 opens with expository narration from Princess Irulan. She catches viewers up on the events of the first film, in particular the destruction of House Atreides by House Harkonnen and her father, Emperor Shaddam IV. If you've read the novel, this opening narration will immediately evoke the epigraphs that begin each chapter, which are written by the princess. In other words, Herbert's Dune is loaded with excerpts from Irulan's writings, accounts of Paul and Arrakis written after the events of the book. She spends much of her life as a writer and historian, and it's fun to see this aspect of her character included in Dune Part 2. We're shown at the very start of the movie that she's interested in the larger goings-on of galactic history, foreshadowing the critical role she'll play in chronicling it. And since Irulan doesn't appear at all in the first Dune movie, beginning Part 2 with one of her citations is a great move for longtime fans of the novels.
Get out of my mind!
Not until you tell them both who I really am.
If you're a fan of Frank Herbert's Dune, then you probably had one big question about Dune Part 2. How would the movie handle Paul's younger sister, Alia? In the book, about 5 years pass between the death of Duke Leto Atreides and Paul's victory over the Harkonnens and Emperor Shaddam IV. Alia is 4 years old in the climactic battle of the first novel, and as a fully conscious mind with centuries of knowledge, thanks to being exposed to the water of life in utero, she's already a competent leader, referred to for her viciousness as Alia of the Knife. Creating a convincing 4-year-old murder princess with deep cosmic knowledge is no easy feat for a live-action movie. To avoid this dilemma, Dune Part 2 truncates Paul's desert chapter to less than 9 months, allowing Jessica to stay pregnant for the whole movie. Alia persists as a vocal agent in the plot, but she does so from within her mother's womb. In one scene, though, we do see her appear to Paul as an adult woman played by Anya Taylor-Joy. If you haven't read the books, this all may be a bit confusing. Alia is incredibly important in Dune Messiah and Children of Dune, and because she possesses powers of prescience similar to Paul's, she's able to commune with him both cognitively and out of time. Both siblings exist on a shared frequency of future sight, and Alia's brief on-screen cameo foreshadows a much larger role in the potential sequel. Dune Part 2 mostly takes place on Arrakis, but it does visit a couple of other planets, including the Harkonnen homeworld of Gedi Prime. In the novel, the planet is described as being incredibly industrialized, to the point that the natural ecosystem is in decline. Director Denis Villeneuve and his team take things a step further in the movie version by making Gedi Prime literally a black and white world. The distinctive color choice is explained briefly in a line just before Feyd-Rautha Harkonnen enters the gladiators' arena for his big fight. The announcer mentions that Gedi Prime has a black sun, which paints the whole world in stark brutalist grayscale. This is both a nice bit of sci-fi flavor and a perfect symbol of the Harkonnens' worldview. They live in and perpetuate a cold, violent culture. Their military mobilizes in scenes that evoke real-world fascist imagery, and they deploy airstrikes and drone warfare against the Fremen instead of fighting fair. Villeneuve told Moviephone, "The idea came from the book. The book is a study of the impact of the ecosystem on human beings, all from the nature of the ecosystem. We are the product of our environment." By using infrared filming techniques, the director was able to establish a uniquely harsh ecosystem on Gedi Prime. He continued to say, "What if instead of revealing colors, the sunlight was killing them and creating a very eerie black and white world? That will give us information about how these people perceive reality, about their political system." Feyd-Rautha Harkonnen is a classic literary foil, a match for Paul Atreides in every way, but with a dark, bizarro spin. The parallels between them aren't just symbolic either. Part of the grand Bene Gesserit plan is keeping multiple candidates for Kwisatz Haderach active at once. They don't put all their chips on Paul Atreides, and it's clear that they have other options on the table, including Feyd-Rautha.
It's not a prophecy, it's a story.
One blink and you'll miss it hint at this occurs when the Bene Gesserit named Margot Fenring seduces Feyd and administers the Gom Jabbar test. In their initial confrontation, Feyd says that he dreamed about her the night before, despite them never having met. Like Paul, Feyd possesses a level of future sight. Had he been raised with the same Bene Gesserit training and Mentat conditioning that Paul received throughout his life, it's possible that he could even achieve similar powers to extended spice exposure. The existence of an alternate path drives home just how fragile Paul's prophecy actually is. He sees the future, yes, but he also gets lucky. In the world of Dune, prophecies are crafted for political gain. This little glimpse of Feyd-Rautha's prescience emphasizes that one little misstep could lead things in a drastically different direction. One of the big set pieces in Dune Part 2 is Paul's first sandworm ride, a major moment in the book that's translated beautifully to the big screen. The sequence is recreated perfectly, but if you haven't read the original version, you may not recognize everything that's going on. Sandworm riding is explained in great detail in the book. The hooks that Paul and the Fremen use aren't just for steering or holding on, but for keeping the worm above ground. The hooks are designed to latch onto individual plates of the worm's exoskeleton, prying them open to expose the softer parts underneath. Such an opening makes a worm vulnerable to irritation from the sand, so it instinctively rotates to keep the open plate on top, as far away from the sand as possible. This naturally positions the rider in a spot where they can stand, leverage more hooks, and begin to steer the worm more actively. And because the plate stays open during the ride, this process also ensures that worms won't try to go back underground while the Fremen is atop them. One of the smaller plot lines in Dune Part 2 is a rivalry between Glossu Rabban Harkonnen and Gurney Halleck. We glean in bits and pieces over the two movies that Gurney doesn't just hate Rabban because he hates Harkonnens. No, that's part of it. Rabban killed his sister when she and Gurney were slaves on Gedi Prime. To Gurney, he represents all the brutality and viciousness of the Harkonnens, and it's only appropriate that such a loyal servant of House Atreides would be the one to kill Rabban. However, this moment is strangely melancholic. It marks the end of the long-standing feud between the Harkonnens and the Atreides, but the start of a much more violent conflict. One thing that Denis Villeneuve's Dune movies gloss over a bit is how the whole Arrakis ecosystem actually works. The first movie reveals that terraforming efforts stopped after the discovery of spice, but we don't get the same expansive explanation that the book provides. Dune Part 2 also provides some tidbits about how the worms work, but it isn't laid out explicitly. In the film, we see that the water of life is actually extracted from young sandworms. It's a biological fluid of some sort. The reason it carries similar prescient powers to spice is that sandworms themselves are critical pieces of the spice growing process. We also see in Dune Part 2 that water is lethal to the sandworms. Though this is never said out loud, we see it in practice. The delicate ecosystem of Arrakis creates a harsh cycle by which spice is perpetually generated. However, this process also prohibits the planet from being made more habitable for humans. Dune is really a tragedy at its core. It's a story of a young man pushed into a violent future by forces beyond his control. Dune Part 2 shows us Paul's rise as a leader amongst the Fremen, but also of his fall. For most of the movie, Paul resists going south. In all of his visions, that trip leads to the holy war he fears, a galactic wave of bloodshed fought in his name by zealots beyond his ability to control. Yet he goes anyway, seeing no alternative. One detail you might not have noticed is that Paul is shown very differently after he drinks the water of life. Before that, there are tons of scenes showing him in intimate moments. Like Chani, we see the real Paul, the private person, not the public figure. But we never get another moment like this after he wakes up from his coma. Instead, we only see him as his followers see him, as a bold leader without a shred of doubt. And like Chani at this stage, we don't get access to his inner convictions. She tells him at one point,
You will never lose me as long as you stay who you are.
But Paul Atreides dies in the end and the Kwisatz Haderach rises.
I will love you as long as I breathe.
Throughout the last act of Dune Part 2, it's clear that Paul has changed. The water of life fully activates his powers, and whatever it is he sees with them convinces him that war is necessary. Even as the final battle rages, you can convince yourself that Paul's behavior is reluctant. He has to defeat the Harkonnens because they're evil, and he must assume the Imperial throne to maintain order. Maybe he'll be able to find another answer besides galactic war. He just needs to take back Arrakis first and figure things out. But then, after defeating Feyd-Rautha, Paul is informed that the other great houses refuse to bow to his rule. Stilgar asks what he'd have the Fremen do, and Paul's answer is simple: lead them to paradise. It's a sinister, chill-inducing line. Not only is he playing on the language of the prophecy to compel the Fremen, but there's clear malice in his voice. He knows he's directly ordering the murder of millions, perhaps billions, but he doesn't waste a second trying to negotiate a more peaceful result. It's just 4 words, but they tell us and Chani that the old Paul truly is gone.